Hi, welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about maps, one of my favorite subjects. When I was a kid, I remember piling into the family station wagon when I was younger, and one of my favorite things was the family vacation where we would venture out to Texas from Illinois. And it was a long ride, and I was one of those inquisitive kids who always wanted to know, hey, why does that sign say we're going to Oklahoma City? We're not going there. And where's this Clinton, or where's Joplin? And more, of course, the whole important question, how much longer? When are we going to get there? So my dad, being a wise man, decided that he would keep me occupied. So if you remember back in the old days before GPS, we used to have those, the maps, the atlases that you'd request from the motor club when you'd go on a long trip, and they would highlight your route on there. And so my dad would give me last year's map, and that would keep me occupied in the back seat. And I would trace along with my finger and try and keep pace with the car. And of course, my finger always went a lot faster than the car. But the bottom line was that I learned how to read the signs on the road and look at the map and compare it and know where we were. And it also made the ride a lot more enjoyable for me and for everyone else. So similarly, they can help us a lot in our family history. And they can make your ride, your family history ride, a little bit more enjoyable too. So I want to take some time today and talk to you a little bit about how you can use maps in your family history. And I'll show you some of the resources that are available on Ancestry.com and how you can find them. So let me flip over to my screen. So why would we want to use maps in family history? Well, the places where our ancestors lived probably look a lot different than they did when your ancestor lived there. The borders changed, county and state lines changed, streets were renamed and renumbered, and people began moving in that urban sprawl. They started expanding out from cities into other territory. And some of the places, there, you may even find that a man-made lake has propped up where your ancestors used to live or near there. So the place might be difficult to recognize now. So that's why historical maps are so important and so helpful to us in our research. Also, you want to consider, look at the geographical features that are around. If there was a mountain between your ancestor and the closest town, he may have chosen to go a little bit further to another town that was across maybe perhaps an easier route. Perhaps a river may have been in their way as well. So being familiar with the lay of the land can help us determine where our ancestors went to town to conduct business and perhaps where they left records. In urban areas, historical maps can help us pin down ward numbers and enumeration districts. That's really helpful when we're looking for those elusive ancestors in census records. And they can also remember ancestors. A lot of times in the urban communities, these immigrants would come in and they would settle in ethnic clusters. And so if you start plotting all the different ancestors or the addresses for your various ancestors, you may find that they were clustered in a particular community, and that may be how they got to know each other. You're also going to want to look and see what churches were in the area, what cemeteries where they may have left records. So again, knowing the lay of the land, knowing where they lived and what churches and cemeteries are in the area can help you locate more records. So probably the hardest part about finding records on Ancestry or maps on Ancestry.com is navigating to them, because these aren't the type of records that are going to come up in your global search. When you put in your ancestor's name, there is one collection that is indexed by surname, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, you're going to be looking for geographically for the area. So let's switch over to Ancestry.com. And I'm going to show you how to kind of explore the records that we have available. First place I go when I want to look and explore the different collections on Ancestry is I click over to the Search tab. Here's where you're going to find all the different collections. Down over here on the right-hand side, and if we scroll down all the way almost to the bottom, you'll see this link to Maps, Atlases, and Gazetteers. And this is a way you can search all the maps, atlases, and gazetteers on our site at one time. You could put the location and keyword here. Or you can go through, this is kind of our top 10. And this is the U.S. Indexed County Land Ownership Maps. That's the one I talked about that's actually indexed by the landowners that are named on the map. So that's something that's helpful to know. This historic land ownership and reference atlases has some similar maps included in it, but those are not indexed. But you do want to check both collections. You can browse to it geographically rather easily, and there may be some maps in this collection that aren't available in the index one. So you definitely want to explore all options, as well as some of these other maps that we have here. And I'll talk a little bit, I'll show you some examples of some of the different types of resources we have available. Another way would be to go to our place pages. And you can go to the place pages just by going to that search tab again. And down here in the bottom of the page, you can click on a location on a map and explore what types of maps they have available. This is great for any type of collection you're looking for. If you scroll down to the maps, you can see here are different maps that are available for Illinois. And in fact, we can even go to a particular county and see if we have maps there. We have a map here for Madison County, Illinois. So you can browse through. If the map section isn't there, it means we don't have one specific to that county, but go back to that state level page and you may find state level maps that have a map of that county included. So those are a couple ways to explore it. The last final way would be to go through the card catalog. And you can just go in here and filter by maps and then by location. And you could narrow down to state or whatever level you wanted to. And you can even narrow it to maps or gazetteers. So those are the ways you would want to go and explore some of the collections that we have. And it's always great to know what resources are available for the places where your ancestors lived. Let's go flip back over here. And let me show you a few examples of some of my favorite collections on Ancestry.com. First of all, we have the 1940 Census Enumeration District maps. And these were added when we added the 1940 Census. When we first added it, we didn't have an index, so these were added as a kind of finding aid so that you could go in and browse to your ancestors on Ancestry.com. If you note where they have the arrow pointing, you can see there's like a little gray line, and they outlined all the enumeration districts. Some of them are easier to see than others, but I've gone in and highlighted the enumeration district here in green. And you can see that this number that I have in the box here, that's the actual enumeration district number. So that would guide you to those records in the 1940 census if you were having a hard time finding them using the index. I thought it was interesting that they actually put the number in the cemetery. I'm assuming they didn't enumerate anyone in there. That was just a convenient place to put the number. But it's interesting to see all this community around it. And again, the people that were living in these communities around the cemetery probably have some people buried in there. So being able to see this on a map is a really helpful thing. This is actually a map of Indianapolis, Indiana. Oh, and I wanted to mention too, I actually have put a list of links of all the collections that I'm discussing in here and the different resources I'm discussing. I posted it to our Sticky Notes Tumblr blog. You may have noticed that on the introductory slide while you were waiting. And when we finish, I'll post another link to that at the very end. But you can go and access all of these different collections so you don't have to go search them out yourself. So moving on. This is the U.S. Index County Land Ownership maps that I talked about. These go from 1860 to 1918, and these are wonderful, rich maps. I just love these. This one is for Millport in Lower Talmansing Township in Carbon County, Pennsylvania. This is actually some of my husband's ancestors here, the Ziegenfusses. And what I like to do with this is it's kind of interesting to see. This is an 1875 map. And when I compare it to the 1880 census, now I can kind of get a bigger picture of everything. I can kind of use these two records together. I can see visually where these people are located and also get a little bit more information, a little depth. For example, Samuel here, you can see the names of all his family, and here's where he lived, right next door to Mrs. Merkham. And you see he was a justice of the peace. Mrs. Merkham's listed here. And you could note one thing to point out too. First of all, when you're searching these maps, use only the last name, and usually they're listed with only a first initial. It's rare that you're going to find more than that. So try searching for just the last name and the location. And if that fails, then maybe try using an initial if you've got too many, if you're looking for Smiths or something like that. But in this case, just using their last name was able to bring up all these hits. And what's interesting with Mrs. Merkham, you see here it's spelled M-E-R-C-U-M, but in the census they have the correct spelling because this is another relative of my husband's, I believe. M-E-H-R-K-A-M was the actual spelling. It's a little hard to read, but her name was Christiana. So it's interesting to go through and compare these records. You can see David down here at the bottom. He was an undertaker. And you can go through and compare the census. Some people may have moved away. Some new people may have moved in that aren't listed on this list. So you can kind of see the changes in the neighborhood between the years by comparing both of these records. And the great thing about some of these maps is they also include illustrations. You don't just get that overview of the place, you actually get a up-close view of some of the towns. This is one from Sangamon County, Illinois, where Springfield is located. And again, here you see these names, the Bullards, repeated over and over, different Bullards in the area. If I was researching Bullards in that area, I would want to make note of all the different ones, make sure that I'm identifying all the family members, whether they be siblings, cousins, parents, aunts, uncles, kind of identify and see how they all fit together. Gazetteers are another great way to see places as they were. This is from Louis Beck's Gazetteer of the States of Illinois and Missouri. And I thought this was a really cool record, especially being from the Chicago area. But this is from Chicago in 1823. It's a description. It says it was a village in Pike County, which now it's in Cook County, as most people around here would know, situated on Lake Michigan at the mouth of the Chicago Creek. It contains 12 or 15 houses and about 60 or 70 inhabitants. So it's really interesting. You can go on and read the whole description, the mixture of the woods and prairies. It looks a lot different than that nowadays, doesn't it? And it goes in, it talks about the advantages of the location, the different things. So it's really interesting to read how a city was back in history and then compare it to when your ancestors lived there maybe a few years later or to the present. And when you go international, when you're not really as familiar with the areas where our ancestors came from, gazetteers and maps can be very, very helpful. When I first found my fourth great grandfather, James Kelly, listed in the Emigrant Savings Banks, it gave his place of origin in Ireland. I was so excited. He was the guy I never thought I would find an origin from But anyways, there he was, and it said he was from Glackmar and County Donegal. And so I went and I looked in Castle's Gazetteer because I really wasn't having a whole lot of time looking for these places and, using search engines and other traditional tools. But I found it in here, and it tells me that it's actually a mountain, and it actually goes on to give me the exact location in Ireland. So now I could go to a map and find these other locations and figure out exactly where that mountain was. And also, again, here, sometimes you get rewarded with another image, a picture. Some of the places include images with it. And for people who have German ancestors, this is a really interesting collection, the German topographic maps. And I'm going to probably mispronounce this really bad, the Übersichtsblatt. But that's basically what this is an overview. And this is your key to this whole collection, this Übersichtsblatt. What it's going to do is it's going to tell you where you're going to want to look when you go to browse through the maps to find a particular location. Now you're going to want to know generally, if you have like a town name, you're going to want to know generally where it is. So to do that, in which little segment you're going to your ancestors lived in, and which sheet you're going to want to find. This is the index, this is the sheet number here. So to find out where your ancestors' town was located or what it was near, another good helpful resource on Ancestry.com is Meyer's Gazetteer of the German Empire. A lot of people may have heard of this referred to as Meyer's Orts. And for example, we have Abens, and it tells us there's a couple different names in here, and Friesig is one of them. And when we go back to the map, we can see that Friesing is one of the towns that's listed as a major town in one of these little components. So I can go in and see, okay, that's on sheet 624. And now when I go in to browse, I'll go into the German topographic maps, the main page. You can see these aren't searchable. So you'll want to go in and find that sheet number. You'll want to find the sheet range. That's going to open up the number. You'll select the number for Friesing. And this is going to give you a list of all the years that are available in the map collection for that area. And so I can go in and select a map. This is actually the 1896 map. And you can see it gives you a really neat visual of even the topography of the area. And you can see the different towns that are around it. And this is something important to know. You know, families may have, you know, intermarried with people from other towns and stuff. So it's always good to be familiar with the towns in the region. And maybe one of the more obscure places where you might not expect to find a map would be our U.S. City Directory collection on Ancestry.com. City directories can often include maps or and especially the street directories are very helpful to look for. For example, if you had an ancestor who lived at like 100 on Adams Street, this is the street directory down here for Adams Street. If they lived at 100, we would know that they would live somewhere between York and Prospect, and that they were on the right side of the street because it was an even numbered house. And you can go, now we can go into this map. This is actually, I forget, I think it's 1873 Brooklyn directory. And you can actually go in and look, and I can plot, okay, this is right about where my ancestor lived, right between York and Prospect on Adams. And those are helpful to go through and browse. There's a lot of really interesting things in city directories that are going to tell you a lot about your ancestor's neighborhood. Also, another resource that you might not think to look up for a map or for geographic information is local histories. This is a book actually that's on our website called This Cleveland of Ours, pertaining to Cleveland, Ohio. And you can go in, a lot of the collections, when you have these, we have these books online, the images of the books, we have them broken down the browse where you can go through and see the table of contents up front. In other cases, you may want to have to search for the table of contents, or you may have a drop-down type of situation where you want to go through and browse, you know, each section in the drop-down menu. But the keyword search is also a great way to go too. If you were looking for a map of Cleveland, this would be a great place to check. So you could enter map in the keyword search. And this is one, another really old map that I found and I thought was really neat, that is from this online book. And this was from, I think it says 1825. Yes, it does. From 1825. So this is a map of Cleveland in 1825, and you can see that it gives you that there's the soap factory, and here's the river ferry over here, and there's an Indian trading post over here, and another house. So there's a lot of different things that you can learn from these old maps, and it's really just a great thing to add some depth to your family history. So I hope that we've been able to give you some ideas, and I will hopefully inspired you to go and look and explore the different places where your ancestors lived and explore the collections on Ancestry.com, and of course to go a little bit beyond as well. There are a lot of different resources that you can find online. Search for the locations. A lot of times we go in into search engines and we search for names alone. Search for more details about the places your ancestors live, and you're going to add a lot of depth to your family history and make that ride a little more enjoyable. I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.